at 5 p.m., 5:01 p.m. on Tuesday, April 30th. Good to see everybody. Thanks for being here. So, let's see here. Do some roll call. All right. Nick Acevedo. All right, thanks. Dennis Baker. Here. Curtis Black. Excused. Matthew Brady. Okay. Jim Carlson. All right, thanks. Jeff Cafalia. Absent. Annie, I see you. Susan, I see you. I'm clearly here, I think. All right, Arlene's here. David Gooder. All right, thanks. Lynn Hackman. All right. Laird's here. Charles is here. Ruth Kobayashi. Here. All right, thanks. Scott Laidlaw. Absent. Katie Love. Okay. All right, Tony's here. Thomas Mang. All right. Jim Mosier. Thanks, Jim. Maxwell Pearson. Absent. Robert Rader. All right. Harrison. Absent. Nancy. All right. Amber Schneider. Thanks. Debbie Stevens. Debbie, hey. Graham Wahlberg. Absent. Christy Walker. All right. Paul, I see you. All right. Lori Williams. Absent. Okay. We have a quorum. Great. Let's see here. Any public comments? All right. Seeing none. We'll move. Right. And we will move on to current business. All right. So let's see. Meeting minutes. We need a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 20th, 2024. Dennis Baker moves. We have a second. All right. Jim, okay. Any discussion? With of course, Mr. Mosier's comments. Okay. Friendly amendment accepted. All right. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? No? Okay. Got one abstention, one opposed and one abstention for me since I wasn't here. You're gonna abstain? Yeah, I'll abstain. So both co-chairs will abstain. Okay. All right, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, our first report is Subcommittee for the Recreational Natural Resources. This is going to be done by Charles. And the idea here is just to receive the report, listen to it, provide any feedback. So Charles, please.
So the report is attached. It's very comprehensive. I'm not going to read it to you. Ben did a great job, and I collaborated on updating the minute or the events that happened. But please have a look at that. We had a very robust meeting. Well, perhaps not as robust as the one I did by phone, but robust meeting recently, and there's a great deal of information in this report. Please read it and comment if you would like. Thank you.
And if I could just add, Charles, or Subcommittee Chair Klob, we do have Elizabeth available to provide a presentation for the group, if that's at your pleasure. Sure. Okay, thank you.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you all. Before I dive into the reports, I do want to just give a little bit of a reminder of the purpose of these background reports, because as you are all aware, we're doing these background reports for each of the general plan topics. So meaning each of the elements of the general plan, as well as resilience, which has been an identified topic by this group. So first, a little bit of the purpose. Really, these reports are to help us understand the issues and those opportunities as they exist just based on the data that's available to us. They're there to inform us, both the consultant team, city staff, all of you, and also inform through our outreach and engagement process with the broader community, and then really to guide those discussions. So these are the conversation starters. They are not intended to have anything set in stone. They're not here to limit discussion. They are here to get the conversation going, and I think that they're doing just that. So I want to thank you all for all of these conversations that we've been having, because they've really been serving the purpose of these reports. A little bit of an overview of the process with these reports and the process of the subcommittees and the greater GPAC. There's a chair for each subcommittee, and they are coordinating the city staff to receive documents for review. We're having meetings with each of these subcommittees to review the draft documents, and then it's being reported out to the full GPAC, and a part of that report is the actionable meeting minutes that are developed through the subcommittee meetings and that you'll find attached. All right, so first we'll start with the recreation element analysis. And just for context, we do have a combined recreation and natural resources subcommittee. So we've got a couple of reports here. So first, starting with recreation, this is really meeting your state requirements for having an open space element. And so open space element requirements under state law are for the preservation and conservation of lands containing or used for natural resources, the production of resources, outdoor recreation, and open space for public health and safety. And outdoor recreation is where you're really seeing that recreation element component come through. There are some new requirements for open space elements, including equitable access to open space for all residents, coordination with the safety element, as well as opportunities for rewilding. And when I say rewilding, that is exactly what it sounds like. It's looking at opportunities where areas were previously more natural, and how do we get them back to their original state. And so the recreation element really, as it's adopted today, looks at parks and beaches, marine recreation, bicycle and pedestrian trails, as well as recreational facilities, things like community centers. So just some key findings that you'll see within the report, and some of the things that we discussed at the subcommittee meeting as well. There are population projections within the economic analysis, which is an appendix to the report. And those you'll find differ a little bit from SCAG's 2045 projection. That is because due to COVID, we've seen some less than projected growth population across all of the SCAG region. So we're seeing that all jurisdictions within the SCAG region are really about 5 years behind those original population projections. We looked at the park acreage standard. Of course, locally, you have a local standard of 5 acres per 1,000 residents, while the state requires 3 acres per 1,000 residents. And based on this 2045 population projection, you're already exceeding local standards by about 115 acres citywide. You'll notice within your adopted general plan that there are park service areas. These really exist for planning purposes. They are 12 geographically defined neighborhoods, if you will. And when we start to look at those population projections within each of these service areas, we do see that many of these service areas may end up being park deficient based on that standard by 2045. And so some of those may be a little bit constrained in terms of that equitable access requirement. So we may see some opportunity there for better connectivity. And then finally, looking at the population makeup, some of the demographic changes that we're seeing is that households with children are decreasing, while the use of recreational youth programs is increasing. And then the population of older adults or seniors, it is increasing, while the use of senior transportation services is decreasing. So you could speculate as to why that may be. There could be any number of reasons. It could be the use of Uber, or maybe more delivery services, things like that. Could be any number of things. All right, so some of the key outreach and policy considerations. We discussed this with the subcommittee as well. There was a robust discussion on park fees, so how park fees are allocated, as well as the dedication of parks through private development. And then also consideration of the prioritization of funds, so how those funds are utilized and prioritized for park investments. We saw some opportunities through creative things like highline and rooftop parks. There's a desire for a parks master plan to really have a comprehensive approach to park planning. There's an opportunity to look at needs by service area. And then there's also opportunity through joint use agreements with schools. And if you're not familiar, the city does have some joint use agreements today with some of the schools where there's opportunity for public use of school facilities, but there may be opportunity to expand that. And then also looking at connectivity as it relates to bike paths and sidewalks, as well as connectivity from the airport area, which is a challenge today. All right, and then next I have natural resources, and I'm going to dive right into that because I know that Charles already gave us a little bit of an update, but if you want to speak after I kind of go through that again, I can pass it back over. Okay. All right, so just an overview of natural resources. So similarly to recreation, you're meeting your conservation element requirements through your natural resources element. So it's just a little tweak of the name, different from state law, but you are meeting those requirements. And the state requirement is to address the conservation, development, and utilization of natural resources. And as you saw from that prior definition, as it relates to open space, you're also addressing natural resources. So you can see where these start to relate and overlap. So this is really concerned with water conservation and quality, waterways, beaches, shores, forest, soils, mineral, rock, sand, which has been a big topic of conversation, gravel, and wildlife. Within the natural resources element as it's adopted today, it also addresses air quality, open space, archaeological and paleontological resources, visual resources, as well as energy. And you'll also recognize that some of these topics are things that we did go through when we talked about the resilience analysis. So a lot of overlap there as well. All right, so some outreach and policy considerations which we discussed with the subcommittee include water management. This has been a key theme through a lot of our meetings with the greater GPAC as well as the subcommittee, specifically as it relates to groundwater recharge, wetland restoration, and concerns with runoff from upstream along the Santa Ana River. Beach nourishment and erosion. We've had a lot of conversations about sand quality, the erosion of sand. This has been a recurring theme, and there's been a need for greater regional strategies identified. Electric vehicle readiness, this is also a recurring theme. So making sure that we're planning for those future technologies depending on what that fuel source will be. And then also looking at opportunities for a city fleet of electric vehicles or some other sustainable mode. Wildlife and plant migration. This is a new topic that was brought up recently, but it was brought up that wildlife and plant migration may be changing, and that's something that we should be considering through the preservation of natural resources. Air quality. This really comes out of concerns with air quality in the airport area. So there's some concerns related to leaded fuel. Our team dug into this a little bit, and this is primarily used by smaller planes. And the EPA recently did release some findings of concerns with leaded fuel as it relates to the Clean Air Act. They haven't taken any action yet, but this may lead to some greater action because it does have some implications tied to their findings. We also had some conversations about Banning Ranch. So Banning Ranch or the Randall Preserve, however you may know it today, this is within the city's sphere of influence. And what that means is it's not actually within the city's jurisdictional boundaries, but it is within an area that is identified at the regional level as having influence on the city's planning. And what that really means for the city's purposes is that there's opportunity to pre-zone areas within your sphere of influence in the event that they are later annexed, and that zoning would then be applied. But this is a potential area to be annexed into the city's boundaries at some point in time, and I think that we'll also consider this through the outreach. And then finally, visual resources. There are existing visual resources already identified in the natural resources element, but there may be opportunity to identify new resources so that we can start to look at view sheds to those resources or corridors or potential viewpoints to make sure that there's continued access to those resources. All right, so I'm going to take a pause there.
Any comments on the report?
Go to the previous slide, please. Just a note for consideration back to at the committee level. The wildlife and plant migration, I think, is very scant. It says changing needs. I mean, that's really broad, and it needs to be clear because in our city, we have migration of animals like birds. We have a large migrating bird population, but then we also have the movement of plants based upon sea level. So as sea level rise, plants will migrate. It's in a sense kind of a different type of migration. So we have annual migration of critters, flying critters predominantly, and then we have plants that are moving slowly. Okay, and then there's also, we have I'm trying to pick the right word, invasives to deal with. Okay, so like Canadian geese is an example. Okay, that's to take back to the committee. I just don't want to lose that thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else? Jim?
Yes, on the last topic, visual resources, I believe we have heard here, being a very view-oriented city, that there is concern about the impact of new development on private views. And there also, I believe, is an ongoing concern about the city's commitment that its own development and operations and activities will be undertaken in a way not to impact and detract from the private views that add much to the land value in Newport Beach.
All right, good point. Anybody else? Thanks,
Jeremy?
Jim. Yes, please, Lynn.
I just had a question as it relates to recreation and open space. Are there areas, I'm confused, are there areas that are not equitable to the residents, or have we identified there being not equitable access to our residents?
Yes, we do have a map where we did like a walk shed analysis within the study that shows kind of the number of minutes walking distance. So we do have some areas, but also it was brought up at the meeting that that's the way that analysis is really captured is looking at like sidewalks and roadways versus if you're like abutting a natural resource. So it's something that we really need to consider through our outreach.
How many parks does Newport Beach have?
Let me look. Excuse me.
No, I think it's considerably different.
Okay, let's see, 94.
Okay, so within the 94 parks that the city has, you were able to identify areas that were not equitable to its residents. And do we have that map? Is it in the packet?
It's in the packet.
Okay.
But it's based on a walking analysis. So again, we're going to need to further support that through our outreach and engagement. We need to hear from the community about their access to parks.
Is walking analysis versus driving or riding a bike, or, I mean, why is it walking analysis? Is that the general standard across?
Yes, absolutely. Having that walking access is the standard for equitable access. We also have looked, you'll see as you kind of go through with each of the parks, we're doing an assessment of access to parking and things like that as well, just to kind of look a little bit closer to see where there may be some opportunities to identify increased access through something like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Lynn, page 73 in the big packet. Charles,
Thanks. So this was discussed at the meeting, and Jim wrote about it on page 3 of his comments. The RENA numbers of 4845 were issued to us by SCAG, and DUDEC hired a consultant pro forma to do a report on the population increase in Newport Beach in 2045, and it was on one of the first slides. There's a huge inconsistency between SCAG's expectation of population growth versus their determination of how many houses we need. That was discussed briefly at the subcommittee, but it's worth noting to the full committee that there's a huge inconsistency there and nobody's talking about it.
Thanks, Charles. Okay, anybody else? Please, David. And then Susan.
Thank you. A couple questions on the air quality. On page 27, it says pollutants that exceed standards originate from cars. Can that be, to me, that seems like a overgeneralized statement. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, little rubber pieces come off of tires of EVs as well as gas cars. What types of pollutants are we talking about here? Also on the bottom, the city's charter. Can we have a source for that? And what mineral resource extraction activities are we talking about? Oil, gas? What is being prohibited by the city's charter? Would be interesting to know.
The question I have relates to the Crystal Cove State Park and State Beach, and whether those are incorporated into your analysis.
All right, so, and I can take a step back as well. So yes, Crystal Cove is incorporated into the analysis. Let's see.
Including the state park?
Crystal Cove State Park and Marine Conservation Area. And this is a state-owned and managed. And let's see, there is a portion of the Marine Conservation Area that falls within the city's boundary.
Which portion is that? The reason I'm asking is there are, I think, a significant number of residences that are adjacent to that state park.
Okay.
And I just want to assure that the area is being considered in terms of conservation, natural plant, and forest management and all of those things, management.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Susan. So figure 2 has a map of parks and open space within the recreation analysis, if that's helpful, and it shows the city's boundaries. But yes, noted, it is being considered, and we'll make sure that we're continuing to consider that. Thank you. And then if you want me to take a step back on air quality, we have within section 4.1, we're noting the air quality concerns. So both ozone, and forgive me, I'm not the technical expert on this, so we have technical people writing these reports, but we're noting ozone and PM2.5, if that means anything to you. But I'm certainly happy to touch base with you afterwards to review this together. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm Jim Carlson. Is John Wayne View Park in the analysis?
I believe so. Let me double check.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is that the Coastal Commission recently, probably a couple of years ago, on the 2510 West Coast Highway project, didn't accept John Wayne View Park as a view park. the city changed the name. They accepted Ensign, and Ensign name was changed in 2017 to John Wayne Park. So it's a view park, but they made a major mistake. I've written them letters and things like that, but I think the city and somebody should, make this a possibility. I mean, some kind of acknowledgement to them that they don't know what they're doing.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and it is here, so we'll note that.
They're not considering it a view park, and it is a view park. It just, the name was changed, and so they don't recognize that new name, and so it's a big deal.
Can we confirm that it's in there for us?
It's
Okay,
in
so
here,
we're good.
and
Okay.
we've noted it as a view park within the park type and
So
facilities
we did it right.
analysis.
We did it right.
But we can look into that a little bit more.
All right, cool. Thanks, Jim. Okay, any other David, please.
Sorry, one last comment. I think I read further in the report about what you, again, technical, mean you there. The runoff sand, talked about that being relocated. Can somebody look into, ownership of that? If it ends up underneath state waters in the bay, in the back bay, who has title to that? And before we can even have that, should we even have that in the plan if we don't even have the opportunity to do anything with it?
Yes, I think that's a good consideration. I feel like actually most of the learning I've had through sand is from many on the GPAC here, but we can certainly look into that. Thank you for that.
Okay. Yes, please.
Thank you. So when I looked at the population charts in there, it's so consistent that the big growth projections are my age and older, and gosh, there's so many factors, that play into that. But I'm just wondering two things. I don't know if there's a place in our work for it to mention it, but two things I'm just wondering about: acknowledging the need to adapt to that in our parks and recreations and the things that we plan for, and then also ways to and I realize this is kind of off topic, but in the development, the new development for housing and the requirements by the state, as much as we all love those, trying to do things to attract more youngers, because going out of business strategy is aging the entire population out. So young people coming to our city and being able to live here is obviously an asset. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
I just have one, probably really quick. So, great identification for all the public parks, and I think that's what allows the equitable relationships that exist in communities. But, there's a lot of different open space. Is there any discussion around, call it the private partnership, or any of those identifications that are going to be taken into account in this report? Even though I know, obviously, the city does not control that, but how does that start to get measured? How does that play into this?
Yes, absolutely. And that's some of the conversation that we did have with the subcommittee as well, really thinking in terms of park fees and park dedications associated with development. And there's certainly opportunity for agreements with the city for a private park to be made open to the public. But also with private development, that certainly adds to park access for those within the private development. And then the other thing where we're looking at those sort of partnerships are through those joint use agreements with schools.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. Anything else? All right. Susan, please.
It's just a question related to the population projections by age, and you're showing the significant increase in seniors. And beyond transportation services, we should be perhaps thinking about a broader understanding of what senior needs are for parks and recreation. And to what extent maybe the Oasis, which may not have been there, I don't think it was in 2006, maybe filling some of those needs, and maybe there might be similar type facilities available on the peninsula or in other parts of the city. Just a thought.
Oh, good, fair point. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. That being said, we've received a report, got some feedback, and so we'll move on to subsection 4C. This is the noise subcommittee recap. So before I turn it over to subcommittee, the chairperson on that, I think, is that Jim? Jim, yeah. I'm going to go to Ben first, and he's going to give a report on this. So, and, oh, by the way, it's on the attachment is on page 161 in your big packet.
All right, thank you, Co-Chair. Just a very brief introduction for Subcommittee Chair Mosier, but wanted to acknowledge that this is the first time that the GPAC Noise Subcommittee has met. Apologize for the delay, but I think it was a very good discussion that Jim will go into, and just wanted to note that this is a starting point for this conversation. So I wouldn't say that this is as robust as what you have on the agenda for the other elements and topic areas. We don't have an existing conditions and background analysis report, in other words. However, we did start the conversation, and I have some working items that I am actively working on with the chair. And with that, I'll go ahead and give it over to Subcommittee Chair Mosier.
Thank you, Ben. Not only do we not have a background analysis, we don't have a PowerPoint, so you'll have to bear with me. The noise element is one of the few that's not included in the DUDEC contract, and the reason for that is when the contract was being solicited, the city staff had some amendments to the noise element that were going to the city council, and those amendments were actually adopted by it. So technically the noise element was revised last November. However, those revisions were limited to moving the aircraft contours and relaxing the noise standards so that the city could approve housing closer to the airport than had previously been allowed. And so that was a very limited scope, but the noise element itself is not limited in that way. It is supposed to address all of a community's noise concerns, whether they be about broader impacts from the airport, whether they be about traffic, loud events, boats, most anything. In addition, there are state requirements that the noise element, when it's revised, is supposed to present for future planning uses what the existing noise contours in the city are and what the projected contours will be at the end of the planning period. And as David pointed out at our meeting, our current traffic contours for the future say that they're only good through 2025, which is next year. So they clearly are not adequate to meet that state requirement. And our new airport aircraft-related contours that we added just last November, I believe, are actually only projections through 2030, which is 6 years from now. So that also is not showing what we expect the airport impacts to be at the end of the planning period. So as Ben said, we held our much delayed first meeting exactly a week ago, and strange as it may seem, I was selected as the chair, at least until I'm deposed. The good thing, despite the limited staff support we have, is that this is the one element where the state actually has very detailed guidelines on how it should be revised. There is an 18-point guideline process that was adopted back in the 1970s, still seems relevant. The first step is the city is supposed to identify a noise coordinator on its staff, which I'm afraid we don't quite have, so I think Ben is kind of serving as that at the moment. And the second step is to compile an overview of what kind of noise complaints the city is receiving. And I believe that's one of the things that Ben is working on. And then our subcommittee will be reviewing that compilation of what people are concerned about, what their noise complaints are received from the city, And we will be hopefully formulating some outreach questions to see how widespread those concerns are, and if they are isolated to different areas of the city or they're citywide or what. And hopefully, despite not being quite in the contract, those noise questions will be added to the outreach. In addition to that, Ben, I think just yesterday, has compiled a list of all the policies. There's about 35 existing policies. I don't think our committee, without having that overview of what the noise picture is for our city, is quite ready to address that yet. But he has compiled a matrix of all of those policies with blanks next to it, put comments and suggestions, and hopefully somebody on the city staff, I hope, can help us with filling in next to those policies for us on the subcommittee to consider and review which of those have been followed through on and which of those have proved effective. And only then, and when we have the broader picture of what the current noise complaint situation is, I think can we really address the merit of whether those current policies are sufficient, whether they need to be strengthened. Some of them could be dropped, new ones needed to be added. So we're at the beginning of a, I think, fairly long process. Hopefully we'll catch up with the other subcommittees. I personally am hoping that at some point the city will develop a capacity to actually measure, possibly in cooperation with the airport that has the capability of doing that, actually measure what the noise is in different areas of our city. So we will have actual quantitative information about whether we just have extremely sensitive people in certain areas or whether actually the noise is higher in those areas. And so at this very preliminary stage, that's about all I can report, and I hope perhaps this is an opportunity for people who are not on that subcommittee to suggest any noise concerns they have that we should be considering. And this might be an opportunity to communicate with our subcommittee as to what those concerns are. Thank you.
Well done, Jim. Without a PowerPoint, very impressive. I like it. All right. Any comments on this? Dennis, please.
I'm just curious about how detailed or not or lack of detail the state got. You implied that the state has some very specific things regarding noise.
Yes. If you recall, noise was a big concern back in the 1970s, and actually the Environmental Protection Agency at the federal level was tasked with doing that and controlling aircraft noise and so forth. That program sort of fell by the wayside. The state, though, in imitation of that, created some sort of noise office within the state structure, and they developed this structure or guideline for how to initially adopt and then revise and update noise elements. So that 18-point procedure is still in the very lengthy Office of Planning and Research General Plan Update Guidelines. And that 18-point procedure is one of the appendixes to that Office of Planning and Research document, which perhaps we should all be familiar with because it generally tells how elements in the general plan should be revised. This is the one that has a detailed procedure. It's in Appendix D. And I said the first step is to identify a noise coordinator. The second, to compile the complaints that have been received. The second, to formulate questions for a community survey to see how widespread those are. And then a number of steps to figure out what to do to address those. And it's also unique in that it is very closely integrated with the municipal code. And actually the noise element has some of municipal code noise standard requirements that are actually in the general plan and are required to be copied into the municipal code. So it's a somewhat unique element. And anybody looking at it, just at the narrative part of it, can see that it's 20 years out of date as to describing what our noise situation currently is in the city. So it does need attention, and we're kind of on our own doing it, but we're going to try.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Dennis. Debbie.
Jim, So the noise isopleths around the airport were updated. Were they not updated based on actual noise numbers?
The contours, Jaime can correct me if I'm mistaken, but the contours that were adopted as our future noise contours were taken from the EIR that was prepared from the last
Airport.
the last amendment to the settlement agreement, which was adopted in 2014, and its horizon was 2030, which is just 6 years from now. And I don't think it projected, and I'm not quite sure who or how you can project what the airport noise impacts will be in 2045, but I do not believe it's that. I believe they're showing at the end of the settlement agreement period of 2030.
Okay, so that's actually a really good point. And I always thought these isoplus contours needed to be updated because if I recall, it's based on something like 1980 data. I mean, it was super, super old, and the planes are a lot more, and they're a lot different. I mean, good and bad too. But and people that do noise modeling can do that. I mean, it's like any other modeling, but it would be based on the number of airplanes in and out of the airport. Basically, that would be the basic stuff. Wow, I didn't know that it was that old, but I do think they need to be updated, and it probably is helpful. It's probably going to help us, not hurt us. Just my thoughts.
Paul.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. The kennels on Santa Ana Heights off Santa Ana, Pegasus, up in that area. Ben, have you gotten, I mean, does that just go with the territory as a kennel area? So there's probably not too many complaints in that area, but is that something that the subcommittee is going to be thinking about a little bit?
It was something that was mentioned at the subcommittee. It's Riverside Drive. It's an area that was annexed from the County of Orange. It's a residential kennel zoning, which is very awkward to tell people that. But it's literally a block of, I think, 16 properties that have the ability to have a commercial kennel as part of their, as an accessory to the residential unit. Residential and kennels together sounds like a perfect mix to me as a planner. So I can't imagine there's a lot of complaints. To be frank, there are complaints in that area. But I will say that the kennel operators, as they change over time and take over existing kennels, the animal control arm of the police department does curtail the amount of dogs that they can have on the property. I think the county allowed like 60 dogs on a property at a time. The current practice is to reduce that to like 29. So there is an impetus to reduce the number of dogs in that area, and further, as those properties develop, there's improved kennel structures and conditions of approval placed through use permits that are helping to kind of clean that up. But it is a known area of interest because of the operational nature.
Jeremy? So I neglected to mention this at the meeting when we were talking about areas of interest. The city has for some time been working towards speeding up traffic between Dover and the Santa Ana River and Mariners Mile. And if they're successful at that, there needs to be some consideration for the additional noise that faster moving traffic will create. So if you could enter that into the discussion. I should have brought it up at the subcommittee, but I forgot. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Paul. All right, any other comments? Jim?
I get my car washed by John Wayne Airport once a week. And the biggest problem I see is the non-commercial, the private jets are the noisiest now. And there's more and more of them. They've actually built a terminal for private jets, and they seem to be more and more. I just wondered if Jim, his committee is going to look into whether that's regulated or not regulated, or how that functions.
Yes, definitely we recognize that the impacts from all kinds of aviation from the airport are a very big concern in the city. We're hoping to include that in the outreach questions, but I at least am also hoping that we will capture other kinds of noise concerns in addition to those from the airport, so that we'll have a comprehensive revision of the noise element and not be just limited to aircraft noise. But it's a very big concern for me I live near it. I experience it every day. I also experience traffic noise.
Out of curiosity, is the settlement agreement for the airport with the city of Newport Beach, does it include non-commercial aircraft? I don't think so, but I don't know.
No, they're only restricted to a stricter noise standard when they fly between the hours of 10 at night and 7 in the morning. But there's no restriction at all on how many of them there could be.
The commercial aircraft, as you know, FAA has standards, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. We're now stage 4 and stage 5 aircraft, so the commercial aircraft are super quiet. And, you know, whether you choose an Airbus or whether you choose a Boeing, it really comes down to the engine, but radically quieter in the sense that some of us are of similar vintage, and we all remember the cracking of the skies with the 727. So, you know, I think commercially and the FAA, we've made incredible strides. Now, private aviation is a different story. If a guy has a private jet and he's got an old G3 and that's basically, you know, stage 2, stage 3, they are a little bit louder, but presumably those aren't taking off, you know, every 20 minutes and from 7 a.m. to, you know, 10 p.m. So, but they are looked at with the same concerns as the commercial aircraft, as well as the bug smashers and the helicopters and everything else.
Thanks, Tony. All right, good question. David, please.
Question was for city staff. When people do complain about noise, where do they all end up? I mean, if somebody calls the police department, somebody calls City Hall, somebody calls someplace else, is there a city process for receiving those complaints?
It depends on the source, frankly, but I think it's a combination of the police department as well as code enforcement. And so I know as part of the subcommittee meeting, I committed to bringing back data on what types of complaints are received. So I'll compile that and provide it at the next subcommittee meeting for review.
Anybody else? No? All right. So received, got some feedback. We shall move on to subsection D. I'm going to turn that back over to Elizabeth first, and then we'll turn it over to subcommittee chair Arlene Greer. And this is on page 167 if you're looking for the attachment. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. So I'll briefly go through the arts and cultural element, and I'll pass it over to Arlene because I know we had some great discussions with the subcommittee. But just a high-level overview, while the arts and cultural element of the general plan is important to Newport Beach, it's not a mandated general plan element. The arts and cultural element was added to the general plan in 2006, and I've highlighted the goals here, which are to have active and vital arts, cultural, and literary activities and programs that enrich the community, adequate physical facilities and venues that support cultural, art, and literary programs, as well as establish a broad range of public and private funding sources to support cultural, art goals, and activities, all of which are things that we discussed with the subcommittee. So some of the key takeaways from our conversations and that will be considered through our outreach and potentially through policy are related to facility needs. So we had a robust conversation related to this. There is a need for more facility and equipment sharing. So the city has facilities and equipment that could be shared, as well as through those joint use agreements that we discussed with the schools where they may have some facilities that could be shared for arts purposes. There may be a need for a large performing arts facility to attract larger events to the area. And really what the group has shared is that a standard size for this facility would be around 1,200 seats. Art should be featured across various neighborhoods, and that's going to require partnerships so that we can make sure that everyone across the community has access to arts in various city facilities, as well as access to an awareness of arts programs that are going on. Funding, so there's a need for more funding, and that is really expressed in that goal as well from both private and public sources potentially. So working to better engage the community to get the community to invest more in the arts. Looking at potentially dedicating some staff to grant pursuits event planning and coordination of advertising various art events across the city. And there was also a broad discussion about the city's existing processes for receiving and maintaining art, where there have been some instances where the city was not able to receive donated art because there were no funds for maintaining that art, maintaining its quality, keeping it up over time. And then finally, marketing and engagement. There's a lot of art, a lot of programs, a lot of things that are going on in the city, and there really needs to be a more consolidated approach to making sure that everyone's aware of the happenings. So this could include partnerships to engage with all neighborhoods, a monthly art watch. So this could be a staff person or a city council member or planning commissioner who is kind of highlighting some key events on a monthly basis. And engaging various demographic groups. I know that we've heard here today, and this has been an ongoing conversation about the growing population of older adults, and making sure that we're accommodating engagement and marketing materials to changing demographics, including those that may prefer print material, but also getting more engaged in a social media from a social media perspective. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Arlene.
That's an excellent report. There's not much left to go over. On page 170 and 171, we had some action minutes from our meeting, and we started off with a very robust discussion and talked a little bit about losing a museum collection years ago from the Hilberts that went over to Chapman, and want to make sure that we're more engaged going into the future with our resources for art and partnerships and culture in the city, so we do not lose those opportunities. We also talked about providing a little more social media, because we're a little short on the social media and publicity, and we've also want to know what's going on in other cities. For example, I've understood that master plan for arts and culture is being done for the first time in Costa Mesa. So we want to do more to look into our master plan for arts and culture, which was done in 2014, and it's wonderful. There are a lot of recommendations in there that we haven't had a chance to pick up on over the years because everyone's been very busy in other areas, but we'll have an opportunity to do that in the future. And then we talked about the grants and the potential for grant funding. We received a grant from the state for $500,000 a few years ago that we sought, and we used that grant for Sculpture Garden Phase 6 and 7, and that was about $300,000. And we're looking into the potential within our committee of bringing together some public and private resources to seek more grant funding in the future. And then we discussed enlivening the website a little more and providing some give and take input. Dennis Baker had mentioned about social media. Social media is wonderful, but you need to provide content for social media before you put it up on a website, and then have the potential for someone to be monitoring it on a regular basis, because there may be people in the community that are reaching out to us as a result of social media with something they want to offer, their time, resources, funding, we'll take it all, and we'd love to know about it. We talked about some of the programming that we've not been doing in the past couple of years. We have a very large Shakespeare audience in the city of Newport Beach, and we hope that in the future we'll be able to reach out to some resources within our sphere of influence in Costa Mesa and at UCI, Laguna College of Art and Design, and some of the local community colleges to enrich our community with some of what's offered there, maybe bring Shakespeare over here to the Green and find a way of managing that within the city staff. Charles Globe talked about alternative funding opportunities such as bonds, grants, and pointed out that there's very little in the city's current operating plan for youth activities, and that's true. Our youth activities are mostly done through the library, but the city has cultural arts grants as a result of I-10, and that is $55,000 a year. And we use organizations that are grantable 501c3s like the Luna Playhouse, South Coast Repertory Theater, the Symphony, the Pacific Symphony, and we put those programs and connect the schools. We fund them. They have funding as well when they come to us. We fund them with a small grant, and then the program is carried out in the local schools. Right now, we have programs that are done with the Pacific Symphony at Anderson and at Newport Coast Elementary. And then moving on, we discussed policy I-9 and I-11. We're reaching the point that we have a very resourceful city and people have resources to contribute art. And art does, as Elizabeth mentioned, require resources and funding to support that. Our sculpture garden that you look out there is a rotating sculpture garden because we enjoy the art for 2 years and then the maintenance becomes someone else's problem when it goes away after we've enjoyed it. We have had more recently some donations from art that's been in our sculpture garden that could have perhaps gone to other places in the city had it had funding provided for in I-9 and I-11. I would suggest, and our committee discussed it going into the future, that we have some guidelines for the acceptance of art, including maybe seeking endowments for the maintenance of the art, so it's not such a burden on the city to maintain art that has been donated. I think I've gone over pretty much everything, but publicity is something we really would love to see increased. We'd like to find a way to do more to connect the people who live in the city with the arts resources like the Sculpture Garden, the Newport Beach Art Exhibition, the concerts on the green. We'd like to do more to be able to connect people in the city with the resources that are available, and look forward to your input with that said. I will take public comment first, or comment from within the committee, before we tell you what our final recommendation was. Do you have any questions? Susan?
First, I wanted to compliment you on your report. I thought it was outstanding, and it gave us great insight into what took place within the subcommittee. And I would wish that other committee chairs would also provide that additional insight into the conversations. I would also like to say that I was a silent participant in your meeting. I was there, and I listened, and I thought the conversations were excellent. And I've read through the documents here. I think and I appreciated Jim's feedback on what happened with the 2014 arts and culture master plan, because that provided great insight. I liked that master plan. I think it's as relevant today as it was 10 years ago when it was developed. And I think that a lot has happened in those 10 years where there may have been lost opportunities, although there's been a lot also that has transpired within the city. But one point that I think that is made here, and I would make the comment about the committee conversation, it did talk a lot about art, but it didn't talk a lot about culture. And that I think, I'll just give you an example of what the Pacific Symphony has done in terms of its cultural activities, where they have the celebration of the Chinese New Year's, and also for the Iranian New Year's, Nowruz. And this year I went to both, and I was amazed at I was just amazed that we have such a huge population within our surrounding communities here And I think it's growing in Orange County too, and we may not be recognizing it. And so I would like us to see, to go back to that 2014 master plan and talk about the culture aspects of arts and culture and what we might propose within the general plan update. So that's just what I wanted to share.
Well, thank you for that, Susan, and you're right. More needs to be done with culture. If you look at the master plan, the goals and objectives underneath it, we weren't provided those by the consultant. We developed those. In fact, Tim Heatherton and I, and Lynn Heckman, I think you had input there too, with those goals and objectives of the general plan. You're right, we never did reach out with the culture. And culture, the definition of culture is arts, religious beliefs, and many other things, not just fine arts and visual art or performing arts. It's much more than that. And we're so fortunate to have a diverse community here in our city. And, we'll be saving money, each of us, going on vacation when there's so much available here to highlight in the city with various cultures. And that would be a good objective going forward, and for us to include that, Elizabeth, in the Dudek report. And I'd like to also say that it took a village to get this all done and get here today. Dudek did an excellent job with the report, and I'd like to commend Paul Watkins and Dennis Baker and Charles Globe for all their work, and Ben Zadiba, Elizabeth Westmoreland, and the city staff. It has been amazing, and there's much more for us to do. Any comments? Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Arlene. I just kind of wanted to coattail on what Susan was saying by way of a compliment for Arlene. Many of us, certainly myself, sat in the back of the subcommittee room, and I drooled even more than I normally do, hearing Arlene, like for 20 minutes, talked about really salient stuff having to do with arts and culture. I just amazed at the depth of information she has and what she has to offer our subcommittee. Having said that, I think one of the things we noticed in reviewing and revising the analysis over the weekend was that the large performing arts facility for 1,200 seats, and maybe you're going to touch on this, Arlene, I don't know.
Yes, I will.
I think maybe we want to go a little bit tentatively on that, or maybe even delete it as a facility need, on the theory that with the lecture hall and the challenges that we had to get the lecture hall passed at council, maybe it's not the right time to suggest that we have a 1,200 seat performing arts facility. Thank you.
That's more of a wish before you go on, Dennis. In fact, it's in our report to delete that so that there's no confusion. We just had the city council graciously agree and supporting the lecture hall, and it would be premature at this point in the general plan to include that. What the idea of having the subcommittee meeting, and I'll give you the final recommendation of the subcommittee, was to basically put everything out on the table and then shave it away so that we could come up with recommendations. And it turned out to be that the report was so comprehensive that we decided to remove, we did, the Arts Center, because there wasn't, every city, some cities around us like Irvine have it, but we're doing other things. And the lecture hall's wonderful. They don't have a lecture hall. We do now. We're going to. And so we're deleting that. That is going to be deleted. I actually did delete it in the minutes that you have on page 170 and 171, Paul. Everything happened so fast since the 23rd, last Tuesday, until today. We wanted to move very quickly so that we could approve the report and move on. And to that end, we did approve the report. We agreed. We have 3 recommendations. And before I do that recommendation, the first is to delete all references to an arts center and a larger facility. We need to build our smaller facility before we even think about that. So remove reference to an arts center on page 22, 28, and 29. in the respective sections, since the city is currently constructing the Whitty Lecture Hall at the Central Library. The second request is that GPAC support to maintain the arts and cultural element as its own standalone element in the general plan. Maintaining a standalone arts and cultural element signifies the prominence and the legacy role that art plays within the city. In order to build upon the city's existing foundation and help promote arts as an integral fixture in the community, it's recommended by the subcommittee to maintain a standalone arts and culture element. Okay, fine, thank you. Okay. Arts is perceived by many in this community and afar as the language that brings people together to develop understanding, connection, and a sense of community. And this can be best fostered through a standalone arts and cultural element. And we do have to be reminded of the culture. That brings a lot to our community. So I would recommend that the committee has already approved it, and we hope that you will support the maintaining a standalone element for arts and culture, that we have already deleted the lecture hall in our minutes even before this meeting today. And then the last item is a section 7.2.2 under establish an appropriately staffed arts and cultural division. The subcommittee supports a suggestion for a consultant, grants writer, or a part-time, or just maybe someone that we retain seasonally or otherwise to help us with grants writing and event planning, should there be a pulse on and have a pulse on local happenings in the arts throughout our city. The role could also include providing for a monthly art watch, which would be regular updates to the community and leadership to increase awareness of arts across the community. So the monthly arts watch would be a great thing. We would hope you would adopt that with the potential for a grants and consultant writer that is not going to be someone who's going to add to the city's pension liabilities. We want to be sensitive to that as well. So our two recommendations, actually three: delete the Arts Center, establish an appropriately staffed person to create grants writing for us and maybe help with public events, and also to have arts and culture remain a standalone element. So we hope that you'll support that. And with that said, and before we vote on it, we need to finish with our comments from the commission. Yes, and Dennis Baker?
Yeah, so two things, and I'm sorry I didn't mention it when we were doing reviewing, although we did discuss a great deal the display in public facilities, and I didn't hear that mentioned. So I want to make sure that doesn't fall through the cracks. And that's not just, historically, before we built this facility here, we displayed art quite regularly in the old city hall, and I didn't see it move over here. But it's not limited to that. It could be in fire stations, it could be in libraries, which we do have some exhibits at. So that's, I want to make sure that gets captured. Mm-hmm. And regarding, Susan, you made me think of the cultures. We are rich in boating culture, we're rich in surfing culture, we are Olympians, all kinds of sports. That's part of the culture. So we have water polo, mm-hmm. we have rowers, we have all kinds of people who've competed in Olympics, and I think that falls into part of our culture. And you're right, we didn't discuss that, and I think that's something that we will be discussing in the future.
Thank you, Dennis, for your comments. And I would hope that we retain that master plan for arts and culture and add to it and emphasize the things that there is a comment in the master plan for arts and culture. It's one of the goals and objectives to develop a master plan for art in the city. And that's just not art that you see out there like sculpture and statues and the like. We hope to bring art into all 7 districts in the city, maybe with things like on the weekend, pop-up art, food trucks, and music in different districts, the 7 districts throughout the year. So capturing Dennis's comment about public art, Nancy asked the question, could the Arts Commission support putting art in other public buildings, not just the library, the Central Library, and here in the sculpture exhibition, and occasionally in our events like the Newport Beach Art Exhibition? Yes, we could. We receive more applications than we approve and have place to put art. So I hope that, Paul, you'll put in a good word for us with the city library group to exhibit art in other city buildings and have a public art plan.
Arlene?
Okay, Charles.
We got carried
Our
away
committee
in
member.
our personal meeting, and we didn't bring up the $55,000 amount that's been the same for years. I'd like to see us put in at least some CPI or something for that. That's been the same amount for years and years and years and not adjusted. So I'd like to recommend that we include that in our wish list of something to address.
Can we do that here, Ben, or do we have to do it down the road? Consider it? Okay, so I would, actually, I joined this committee because of that. It's not enough. Every year we have more grants than we can possibly fund. So I would propose that we add additional funding, the city consider adding additional funding for cultural arts grants per I-10. Is that okay?
Just
And Lynn?
yeah, just a quick, a couple things. I'm just wondering, as it relates to master plan, has there been any discussion about bringing I-13 back? Because I know when we were on the Arts Council together, the City Council voted to eliminate the I-13 provision, which was, I think, 1% of development fees. There's going to be a lot of development going on in Newport Beach over the next 10 years. Has there been any discussion about bringing back those development fees?
Yes, it's in the report. It's in this report from DUDEC. They noted that we did have that money. That fund actually grew to $1.1 million when we had it. So that's a very good thing. We should.
Are we bringing it
consider that.
back? I mean, they got rid of it. So.
I think we should add it, just like we just have the city, ask the city to consider I-13 being added to the master, to our.
If we're going to
culture,
acquiesce
arts and
to
culture.
all of the development, I think there should be some provision to what you were talking about.
Right, we don't know if it can be funded even, by that. Maybe the city has other designs, but we could. And can we, and Nancy, you would be better to address that. Can we ask for consideration in our plan down the road, or should we be just making sure that we note that be explored in the master plan, general plan? Some guidance on that would be great.
This group can ask for anything. One of the things that I would do in something like that would be put it in my report and just see if there's any red flags that go up instantly from council. If not, then go ahead and pursue it. But I think you can always put language in. You don't have to be too specific at times to put language in a policy that would support that sort of thing without necessarily calling out the specific rule that has gone by the wayside.
And I think the DUDEC report does have exploring city policies for reaching some of our arts and culture funding and growth.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that would be a good place. I think that was done away with in 2017, Lynn, when they did the city had a book
and
this thick of policy revisions.
Right.
So it would probably be called something else.
It was it was a big deal at the time.
Yes.
And former Vice Chair Kerr and I went to considerable effort to come up with public-private partnerships with the symphony, with the center, with all of the arts partners in Orange County. And we were told by the city attorney, after conducting quite a bit of outreach and discussions and meetings at the Pacific Club and all of that, that we were not allowed as an arts commission to raise money. And so how is the public-private partnership element going to be handled if what happened to us when I was the chair of the Arts Commission, if that is going to stand, how's that going to look? How's that going to work?
That is an issue. I recently, when I left and termed out with the city, I went over to the foundation. One of the first things I did was review the bylaws. And there is language in the bylaws that needs to be changed. The foundation, which is the fundraising arm of the City Arts Commission, and it can't raise money for anything else but the foundation to support the City Arts Commission. We did propose that to the city, and at this time, we weren't able to get that changed. We hope that will be changed in the future because it's very critical to being able to have public and private public and private partnerships.
Right, right.
The
So-
library did the same thing. They separated it out and resolved that issue in 1999. And the Newport Beach Arts Foundation needs to do the same thing. And they'll get to it. And the city, it will have to be a collaboration with the city.
Okay, and we might also want to consider a program to encourage private buildings to incorporate public art. For example, the gas station in Corona Mar has the public art on the walls, whereby, I don't know, the building owner gets some, I don't know what, encouragement, whether it's a tax thing, but, and then my last comment is just, how are we incorporating the other arts organizations like Sherman Gardens and the Balboa Island Museum and Historical Society? There's a lot of art galleries and such. So is that the St. Vianney, concert series and the Balboa Island concert series? So there are other entities that are providing, performing and visual arts. So I didn't see anything in here about that, but I just thought I'd say we do have other.
This document, as I understand, is a starting point. Is that correct, Ben? Okay. How much time do we have, in the future?
Yeah, I just would emphasize it. Sorry, Chair. I would emphasize that this is, as it was put by Elizabeth, this is a conversation starter, and this is supposed to be a comprehensive snapshot of existing conditions in the city as well as best practices. And so I think kind of what we're getting into now is more policy considerations. When we start talking about specific numbers of funding that we might want to consider increasing, I think to Steering Committee Chair Gardner's point, that could be done through a policy directive where we're suggesting a policy to enhance and encourage funding opportunities through grants or what have you. But I think for now, the idea would be to move this report forward so that it can help encourage and inform the outreach and engagement efforts that are being done and will be talked about in the next item. But I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that we're not limited to whatever's in this report. I think, as was said, the subcommittee did a fantastic job shaping it. We can definitely build on it from here. And as we move into policy considerations, some of these more specific items on directives on what we'd like to see moving forward would be addressed then.
I've made notes of all this, and we do have the minutes. Okay. More? Okay.
Quick question.
David? Yes.
Translation, I-10, I-13, for those of us who are not involved with this.
Okay. I-10, but the City Arts Commission has various policies. I-9 and I-11. I-9 is relative to the commissioning of art. I-11 is art that's already been made and whatever, and it's donated to the city. It could be fine art, sculpture, whatever. I-10 are cultural arts grants as a result of the general plan in 2006 that mandated that the City Arts Commission receives and the city donates $55,000 per year to enrich through cultural arts grants, arts, culture, and historic resources in the city. And they do that each year. I-13 was a policy that no longer exists. That was 2% of the developer's fees that would be contributed to building a fund to support the arts, culture, and historic resources in the city. Did I catch them all, Ben? I-9, 10, 11, 13. Lynn, did I get it all? Okay. Charles?
So I'm not necessarily promoting this idea, but in the 70s, the city of Brea developed an art and public places program where they required the development of new projects to donate 2% towards public art at the building. It wasn't paid to the city didn't administer it, it wasn't a fund that didn't necessarily get used. It required that prior to the certificate of occupancy that a piece of public art was placed at the facility. If you've got time, look up the City of Brea Art and Public Places. It's easily the most comprehensive one in Orange County, and they've been doing it since the 70s.
Thank you for that. I think Arts OC is doing a public plan out there, master plan. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Mr. Mosher.
Thank you, Arlene. I was going to make a comment similar to Ben's about what we are voting on tonight, which I think is a background report that's supposed to guide DUDEC's outreach, and the outreach might change opinions about what we want to do in the general plan.
This page you
And
all
we,
have.
we seem to be drifting kind of off into kind of solidifying what our conclusions will be before we have that outreach. So I'm slightly uncomfortable with that. But the other comment I wanted to make is about I recognize the importance of art, and I agree with you on that, and culture. And so I see the reason for a standalone element, but at its future meetings, I would ask the committee to consider how much the current standalone element has been guiding anybody in the city for the last 18 years. Have any departments actually been looking at it or making decisions based on it? I would doubt that has happened a great deal. And so you might be asking yourself, if it is going to continue as a standalone element, what needs to be changed to make it more effective and actually be guiding somebody, which I don't think it's been doing
Well,
in the past.
when you finish with that, let me say this, and then we do need to vote on this. We don't need to vote. We don't need to have a resolution. It just carries forward. I'm just letting you know that the committee does support the points that are listed here on the paper today. Mr. Mosier, we have bylaws. The City Arts Commission sort of is the oversight in the city as a commission, and it's arts, culture, and historic resources. And their bylaws specifically state to raise awareness of arts, culture, and historic resources. We're already working with most other city departments. We're under the umbrella of the library, and we are working all the time with Parks and Rec. We hope to be working with natural resources in the future and bring together natural resources and art in public places out in the exterior there. So I think that we don't need to if we integrate as an integrated element, the committee felt that was not the right direction for us at this time. But then again, this is something we're voting on today as a standalone element, and basically, is there a majority, is there a consensus against it in the room? I should hope not, because we didn't even get to the cultural part, let alone integrating it into the other 9 elements and not a standalone element. Is there any consensus against the committee's standalone element? Hands? None. Okay. Well,
I just would
Yes.
like to suggest that
yes, Nancy.
that wouldn't be a final decision, because there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of elements in different capacities, and there may be a feeling as you develop your work that you do want certain things connected, you do want certain things divided, and it may be a little bit early to be making a final decision on something like that.
Okay. We'll keep that in mind when we go back to our subcommittee. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Dudek for the great job, and the staff and the committee, and for you, all of you, your input. I couldn't wait to get here today and hear what you had to say about this report, and I'm sure that Charles, Dennis, and Paul feel the same way, and staff. Thank you. I'll turn this over to Ben. Okay, the item next. I'm sorry we lost Jeremy here. We had a deal. He was running the meeting. Presentation overview of upcoming deliverables and objectives. Dudek, Kearns, and West. Okay.
Great,
Turning it over
thank
to
you, Chair. Janitor J. Maldonado. I'm going to share a little bit about our outreach and engagement updates. I'll make this brief and just thank everyone so much for your participation in what we've done so far. So we've had 5 pop-up events. We've engaged about 350 people. When I say people, I mean adults. We've engaged hundreds more children as well, but really had good conversations with about 350 folks. The Rainy Mayor's Egg Race, I don't know if folks were there. That was actually a really fun, successful event in terms of engagement. The Newport Beach Farmers Market, the Corona Del Mar Farmers Market, and the activity at the Environmental Nature Center at the Native Plant Sale there. And just last week, we're at the Newport Beach Central Library. We've been sending out after action reports after each of these just to update folks on those conversations, some key themes that came out. And those activities were unique to each of those locations. A couple repeated, and then we had a QR code that linked folks to the website as well. In terms of the Newport Together website, since Friday, March 22nd, our website engagement has increased by about 1,300 views. And then from its inception to today, we've had about 4,100 folks engage with the website. Our questionnaire and map has had about 30 contributions to the questionnaire, 54 to the map. Our next big push is going to be really focusing on getting engagement to that website, but we're having folks get to the website, click around, learn information. I will note in terms of something that was important to the outreach subcommittee was really thinking about what our metrics are and how we're measuring engagement. So I wanted to talk about reach and then how we'll respond in future engagement to respond to how the reach is happening here. So our social media posts, we have between Instagram and Facebook about I'm so bad at math, so we're getting close to 6,200. That's an easy number, but it's late tonight. 6,200 folks reached through that, which is not surprising for us. You know, Newport Beach isn't the most active on social media, but look at the reach of Stu News, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone here, but Stu News definitely was some of our largest engagement with folks. And Daily Pilot, we had about 12,000 folks reached. We did hear from Daily Pilot that the click-through rate on our ad was remarkably high, and that they were, they just kind of gave us a little congratulations on folks engaging through that. I will say too, we did hear at the pop-up event, a lot of people said that they saw the ad in the newspaper and on Stu News or through the city manager's update. This uptick on March 22nd, I believe that's the day the city manager's update went out. So when we're thinking about how we're going to engage folks, we think about all the different channels that we have, but we want to make sure we're focusing on the ones that are most successful. So that city manager's update, Stu News, and even Daily Pilot are great. And then continuing just the visibleness of social media and ad engagement. Before I go to the next steps, I do want to thank GPAC members who attended the pop-up events. We saw a number of you there, and I just want to express appreciation for that. There are a lot of people who had questions that were deeper than the general plan, just what's happening in the community, how they can be engaged, what's happening with policy, and having GPAC members there was really beneficial to help with those conversations. I'm looking at Debbie because I know there's some good conversations with Debbie, and Jim and Nancy and others who were able to engage in that. And so just wanted to express appreciation. One thing that I'll note here in terms of our next steps for engagement, we have the Battle in the Bay, May 22nd, and as a water polo player, I am so stoked to be there at that event. One thing you'll note that is missing from our next steps is the Balboa Island Art Walk. So we've been doing a ton of coordination. Arlene, I see your face, and Arlene has been working so hard behind the scenes. But I think it was determined that that wasn't the art event for us to attend, just because the focus really was just on public arts. And so in coordination with the Outreach Subcommittee Chair, it was determined that we would do another pop-up event further on when we're talking about policy development to do with arts specifically, at an event where we could have that tangible engagement too. And so the game plan with the outreach subcommittee chair was important. So Battle of the Bay is next. We're really excited for that, and we've just been really impressed with the level of engagement. One other thing, I don't want to go too long, but about 25% of folks who we've engaged with at the pop-up events noted that they had heard of the general plan update and they knew what it was, which is a really great thing. And one thing we were really intentional about was as much as we could with with some of the events had a flood of people. Some had more of just that longer conversation of understanding visitor versus resident and really understanding what that input is. It's important to get that visitor piece of what they're hearing, but we really want to make sure we're capturing that resident input as part of it. Anything I'm missing? Yeah, we had a lot of excited people, and we had some great activities. And I want to remind folks, too, those activities are really hands-on and tangible and fun, but it's the conversation that we get to have with folks about something while their kids are doing something really interesting and fun and grabs their attention, and we get to engage in deeper conversation. So I'll turn it over to Elizabeth to talk about some of our other next steps.
All right, thank you, Jenna. Okay, so next things we have coming your way, we're going to be reaching out to the subcommittees to review the safety element analysis, the harbor and bay element analysis, and the land use element analysis. And then following behind that, coming soon to you will be the implementation program analysis as well as the diagnostic memos. So it's coming along.
Arlene?
I'm sorry. Yes, Debbie, please.
Now? Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So just a comment, and that was very funny. And to Jenna, I don't remember your coworkers' names, but I want to tell you these girls get out there and hustle it, okay? They weren't sitting behind a desk. They were out there hustling. I was very impressed, and they drew a lot of people in. So big compliments to the Kearns West team. And plus, it really was a lot of fun. And what Jenna was talking about is when you ask the people, what about the city, what's going on with the city, some of them come up with, okay, I don't like the homeless here. The city council is doing nothing about this. And you just want to sit there and smack people upside the head for, before you complain, learn a little bit. And so I was running interference on some of those and trying to explain what the city was doing. But it is, and maybe at the Battle of the Bay, which this is Laird's event over here, maybe have somebody from the city, there to talk about those issues, which really aren't the general plan, but they're going to come up. Mm-hmm. Just a thought. Anyway, good job.
We have Taylor and Bushra.
Oh, Bushra, hello. And I'd like to add 2 event potentials for you. On the 29th of May, the Newport Beach Historical Society is having an event called Back and Forth that they're working with. Are you aware of it? Back and Forth with the Balboa Ferry. And Seymour Beak is going to be a speaker, and there'll be a dinner afterwards at the Balboa Pavilion. And then you may consider, I talked at length with the people at the Art Walk about finding some place that you could be. And they said you can be anywhere on the island, and anyone who attends that day, I know you're already planned, and it's too short a notice. But then there's the Balboa Parade, the Balboa Island Parade. I don't know if your outreach, Annie, are you thinking about that in outreach? I don't know. That's huge. Everyone comes.
Yeah, that's a great one, and I think we'll bring those back to the subcommittee. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments?
Arlene?
Yes,
So
Charles?
Circling back to the diagnostic memo that I never stopped talking about, since it's not finished, could you have the consultant include some if-then on the judge's ruling this week on SB 9? It's not going to end with that ruling this week, but there's some if-thens on what could happen next. We haven't had any SB 9 applications in Newport yet, have we? But still, it's out there.
Ben?
Thank you.
No? Yes,
It's
please.
what allows you to subdivide a single-family lot anywhere into what can end up being 8 or 9 units.
Okay. Thank you.
No, sorry, we fixed that in the code, so it's 4 units. Yes.
That has an implications here that's worth exploring.
Okay.
I also
yes.
want to compliment the consultants. They did a great job. The graphics were fantastic. The booth setup was great. I went to the environmental plant center or plant sale and was very, very impressed. And they told me there was already 26 people that had been there before I was there. So it was, I was impressed about how they did it, how they caught the kids, things, how they got the information, and I was happy.
That's wonderful. And I've thanked Dudek, and I do want to thank Kearns and West. Thank you for everything that you're doing in Dudek.
Arlene,
Yes.
just really quickly.
Another, Lynn?
Just last really quick, because I know we want to get going. I, too, saw the ladies at Cornell Mar Farmers Market, and you were doing a great job directing people to the website. The table looked very presentable. There was giveaways, marketing materials. It was very nicely done, so good job on that. And then I was just going to state that I wrote an article in the Epic Times about a year ago on SB 9 trying to explain it, because it is a little bit hard to digest. So if you Google Lynn Hackman, Epic Times, SB 9, there's an article you can read about it.
Thanks, Lynn, for contributing that. Okay. Any others? Otherwise, Nancy, okay. I'm sorry? Nancy had.
Did you want to say something, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
First, regarding the outreach, in addition to the pop-ups, I think at one of our previous meetings, a member of the public was asking if there was going to be a more general community forum or town hall kind of a meeting. Is that in our future, or is it only pop-ups?
I think for this phase, we have pop-ups, and as we get into policy, the policy section, there'll be those town hall workshop settings.
Okay. And then as to the reports in the coming soon, this may be premature and it may seem incredibly wonky, but the implementation program that you're going to be analyzing is the second to last chapter of our current general plan. There is a chapter following that, which is actually important but neglected, which is called the glossary. And people reading the general plan policies may think they say something and not realize that a word that's used in it is defined in the glossary and has some special meaning. And our current glossary seems to have just been kind of tacked on from somebody else's general plan. So it defines words that are not used in our general plan, and it gives unexpected definitions of words that are used. If there was a way to do it in a more modern general plan, it would be really convenient, like in a Wikipedia article or something, that people reading it could know that they are reading a defined term that means something different than they might think. And even if that can't be done, the glossary really needs to be cleaned up. So I think that chapter should not be neglected. I don't know if it's in your contract, but I think it needs work.
I just wanted to respond, Jim, Annie Clordy, to your question about go-to meetings, and I want to say, do we have 9 budgeted for go-tos? You would ask for like...
I think we have 20.
Oh, 20.
Yeah.
Gosh, sorry. It's a long night. But we had discussed emailing out the subcommittee about a few specific ones, like the Newport Coast, and then also we thought Spawn, or one that you're involved in. Ben and I had talked earlier about those specific two, kind of getting those on the agenda. So those are definitely in the works. So thank you.
Is there like a list and things coming up that we can plan ahead for? Okay.
Yes, to answer you, they do have it. And so these were like on our last meeting, the big ones. And so now that those are done, we're going to be discussing the kind of next phase.
Should we be looking for that maybe online? Is that a good idea?
I don't think they've been decided yet. I'll let you answer that. They're in the works.
Okay.
I think that we'll be working with the outreach subcommittee to confirm those next steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other comments? Susan DeSantis?
I just wanted to ask whether Speak Up Newport, as an example of a gathering where we know it draws in at least 100 people, you may not be doing it as a pop-up, but I think the city staff typically do attend, could bring the cards with the information and the code that people could, and there could be a brief alert that this is going on.
Well,
Nancy goes to these meetings, so does Paul, and so do many of the members here. So it's just a way of expanding.
That's a good idea. And Paul, your wife is on the board, right?
Sorry to answer that, Annie Clardy again. So Ben and I had a call today, and we kind of discussed emailing out the outreach committee. The email just hadn't gone yet, and Speak Up Newport was going to be one of the things where we could discuss as a go-to. So it's definitely in the works, and it's TBD, working on it.
Thank you.
And I'll quickly say it's, the questionnaire that was sent out to GPAC members of like what's important for them for go-to meetings. That's what the list is based on. Our research and then what the GPAC has shared. And then,
okay.
Arlene, if
Yes.
I may, just really quickly regarding the diagnostic memo, I just want to set expectations. So since 2017, the state has signed into law nearly 100 new housing bills, where the housing element is the one element that is not on the table through this general plan update, and we are not addressing new housing bills within the diagnostic.
So what's the diagnostic going to cover then?
Oh, there's a lot of other legislation that relates, some of it's new, some of it's not, but it still applies. So there's new legislation related to other elements. There's legislation that applies to our process just generally. And then there's legislation that isn't directly related to the general plan, but is related in some parallel aspect, and we'll be going over that as well.
Okay. All right. Susan?
This is a question for staff related to the upcoming subcommittee meetings. Have those dates been set yet?
No, they haven't. So a doodle poll will be distributed to those committees shortly this week.
All right, and I was going to ask if we could expand the participation in those subcommittee meetings. That maybe there are other members who would like to be going that may not be on the list. Is that possible?
Okay. Yes? Have we answered it all? Okay. We're good? Can I proceed? Okay, the last item. Committee announcements or matters which members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report. It's a non-discussion item. Charles?
Yes, I have something. So, as you know, the city is intending to put a ballot measure in November ratifying the land use element, and I'm being broad here with it. There is a white paper that was produced by a member of the public that's been circulated. A few of us have seen it, that makes some, it has insights into things that might go into that are, allow excess units than what we're really intending. And I'm not trying to be broad about it, but I'd like to see a report on a future agenda or a presentation regarding that white paper and its ramifications, or if what the allegations are made in it are valid. Again, several of us have seen it. Some of them have analyzed it. Some of them think it's a good idea, and we know the city has seen it. Any thoughts on that?
So I'm aware of a white paper. I myself have not seen it. So if you're willing to share it with me, I'd be happy to put that on the next GPAC agenda just as an informational report item, or we can talk about what that looks like on the agenda. But I have not read or seen that report. If you can share it with me, then we can definitely share it with the GPAC.
I have seen it, and it's interesting in that it says that currently the way our land use element is constructed, that bonus units and many developers, depending on how much affordable housing they develop, are allowed to have density bonus. These density units are not counted against the specific numbers. And this proposes that the density bonus units should be counted, so we would end up with fewer overall units. I guess one of the concerns is that for some reason, this committee, is subcommittee, Land Use Element Committee, and the Planning Commission didn't seem to be aware of this and whether it should be open for a new discussion. We are also, though, however, dealing with timing in all this. So what I'd like to do is very informally, this is not on the agenda, but just see if there is interest on the committee's part to readdressing this, in which case I can talk to the mayor and see if that would meet with his, or whether they want to handle it differently. But I would like at least to get a sense of, does this General Plan Advisory Committee wish to have this particular issue addressed, whether we should have the bonus units counted in the overall number, or if we have an overall number plus the bonus units on top of that. Is that a topic for discussion?
I'm trying to understand, are these some of the, I'm sorry. Are these some of the state and Senate bills that have passed that allowed it's the city?
It's our own, and how the language currently is probably not protecting us from counting the bonus stuff. And the argument to count the bonus stuff is a valid one, in my opinion. So this is not any attack or challenge of any state or federal mandate. It's just how we're going to word our ballot measure to help ensure that we count the bonus units.
So if I can get just a sense, so I can report to the mayor, is this something that the committee would like to at least address, or hope to have addressed again? And if you'd raise your hands if you would like that.
Question? Is it within the scope of this committee or not? Because it seems like that's outside. Has that to do with the housing element, and that's not our scope, isn't it?
This is to do with the land use element, and this was very much within the purview of this committee, which reviewed the land use element and made certain recommendations. So is there, Art, how many don't want it? Because now maybe it's easier to count that. I saw.
Or Nancy, do you want me to provide a little bit of background, maybe?
Okay.
For clarity. So under state law, we do have density bonus laws. So as an incentive to developers, to encourage them to build affordable housing and include it as part of their development, depending on the percentage of affordable housing they provide, or if they provide a special housing type, they get a bonus of units above and beyond what our current general plan and zoning allows for. So in the past, for example, like in the airport area, we have 2,200 units allocated. We have a number of projects that we've been processing. The density bonus units that each of these projects have been entitled to aren't taken into account in that 2,200 limit. They're kind of above and beyond. And so as part of this new effort, as part of our housing element implementation plan and the new land use element policy, we've identified new opportunity areas and different focus areas. And so consistent with past practice, we've identified that those density bonus units are above and beyond the allocation we've identified for each focus area. And so as we've worked on the housing overlay, we made it's come up, the question has come up, and it's been a little bit ambiguous. So we've tried to make it very clear that the density bonus units are above and beyond the development limits that we've established for each focus area. And I think the question is whether or not those density bonus units should actually count against the development limits. So as developments go forward, any density bonus units would actually count against the cap. So I think that's the main question.
Thanks. I would like to know if this is something that really is being handled at the higher level. We spent quite a bit of time on this early on and didn't really have too much say on it at the end of the day. And so I think if we had a voice but it didn't really matter, I wouldn't want to spend more time on it, A. And B, thought we did kind of say that it was a negotiation when we came up with those caps of 50 or 75 units. It was pretty clearly stated in this room that, it's all a negotiation anyway for each developer, so they can just handle it through planning commission. So that'd be second. So, and that goes back to, did we already kind of make a decision? And second, if we say anything, does it really matter?
I think
we won't know unless you do it. So I would like a sense, because if nobody's interested, then I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to send anything to the mayor and try to reopen it. But if it's something that people are concerned about, then at least I would like to present it to the mayor for him to give us some direction.
I think it's worth a try. Okay, so I mean, we've got our arena numbers that we need to make, and those are going to be hard to make to begin with. I think it's really worth a try. And the other thing I found out, do you know what the arena number is for Irvine, which is right next to us? 54,000. Okay, so we don't need more. We're going to have a hard time making what we need. So I would support that.
I would support it as well. It's going to be an issue as we're moving forward toward a November vote. We need to be clear and we need to understand what the implications are, and we should be discussing it if it's going to be part of the land use element.
If I may, before we adjourn, we were planning to have the Land Use Element Subcommittee meet anyway in May. I don't know if it's something that you would want us to just talk about more there, just to committee member Rader's point. Right. They talked about it ad nauseum, so.
I'm mainly concerned about timing, and I know that the mayor has been talking about that, so I'll just make sure that he's comfortable with the timeline.
Okay, so we have the decision. We're doing it in a committee? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. All right, then, before we adjourn the meeting, do we have a date for our next meeting? June 5th. Okay. No? Okay. Okay, we're adjourning the meeting, and the next meeting is June 5th. But wait to hear from the department. Thank you.